The night the dragons came, nobody was ready. Not the town, not the scientists, not the government men in their black SUVs with their thermal cameras and their clipboards. Nobody was ready except one man. His name was Marcus Webb. He was not a hero. He was not a soldier. He was not famous. He wore a yellow hard hat. He carried a worn leather notebook. He drove a beat-up truck to work every single morning in a small town in northern England. He was a foreman, just a construction foreman. But on the coldest night of the year, 4 ancient dragons appeared at the edge of his worksite. And they were not there to attack. They were not there to destroy. They were begging. A whole family of ancient frost dragons, creatures older than the pyramids, stood shivering in the snow outside Marcus Webb's construction shelter. And not one person in the world knew what he was about to do next. What happened that night would change everything. Not just for Marcus, not just for the dragon family, for every human and dragon alive. Because it turns out Marcus was holding a secret the dragons had been searching for across centuries. And he did not even know it. Tonight you are going to hear exactly what he found underground. You are going to understand why the dragons chose him specifically. And you are going to see what happened when the rest of the world found out. This is the story nobody was supposed to tell. Let me show you exactly how this happened. The blizzard hit northern England on a Tuesday. By 6 in the evening, the roads were buried. The lights in town flickered. People pulled their curtains tight and turned their heaters up high. Nobody wanted to be outside on a night like this. Marcus Webb was still outside. He was always the last one to leave the site. That was just how he was. While the rest of his crew packed up early and drove home before the storm hit, Marcus walked the perimeter one more time. He checked the fencing. He checked the equipment. He made sure nothing would shift in the night. The project was a big one. A new community center for the town of Ashbury. They had been digging deep foundations for 3 weeks now. Deep enough to hit rock. Deep enough to hit something old. Marcus pulled his coat tighter and breathed out a long cloud of steam. The snow was falling fast now. Thick, heavy flakes that stuck to everything. The floodlights on the site cast a pale yellow glow across the white ground. He was about to head to his truck when he heard it. A sound. Not wind. Not machinery. Something else entirely. It was low and deep, like a groan coming from the ground itself. Marcus stopped walking. He turned his head slowly. He listened hard. There it was again. Coming from the far edge of the site, near the old stone wall that bordered the property. Past the generator, past the stacked steel beams. Marcus did not run. That was not his style. He walked, steady and calm, the way he always moved on a job site. One hand went to his flashlight. He clicked it on. He rounded the corner of the storage container. And then he stopped. Standing in the snow, pressed against the old stone wall, were 4 dragons. Marcus blinked. He looked again. Still 4 dragons. The largest one stood about the height of a horse at the shoulder. Its scales were pale, almost white, the color of deep ice. Its neck was long and elegant. Its eyes were a soft, muted blue, like the sky just before dawn. And those eyes were looking directly at Marcus. Beside it crouched a slightly smaller dragon. Same pale coloring, same ice blue eyes, but this one held its wings tight against its body and was trembling hard. Behind both of them, 2 smaller shapes pressed together in the snow. Young ones, maybe the size of large dogs. They had their heads down and their eyes half closed. All 4 of them were shaking. Marcus stood still for a long moment. His flashlight beam swept slowly across each one. He could see the frost on their scales. He could see the way their breath came in short, weak puffs of fog. The two young ones barely lifted their heads when the light touched them. These creatures were cold. Not just cold. They were dangerously cold. Something about the way they moved, or did not move, told Marcus everything he needed to know. He had spent 20 years on construction sites. He had seen men in the early stages of hypothermia. He knew what a body looked like when it was shutting down. These dragons were shutting down. The large one, the mother, Marcus decided, took one slow step toward him. She lowered her great head. She did not show her teeth. She did not spread her wings in a threat display. She simply looked at him. It was not a look of hunger. It was not a look of aggression. Marcus had looked into the eyes of 1,000 people during hard moments on hard days. He knew what desperation looked like. That was desperation. He stood there in the blizzard for 30 seconds. Snow piling on his hard hat. Wind cutting through his coat. The logical part of his brain was saying many things, none of them calm. But the part of Marcus that had spent his whole life solving problems on job sites, the part that never panicked, never froze, never walked away from something that needed fixing, that part was already thinking. He turned off the flashlight. He looked at the mother dragon one more time. Then he turned and walked toward the storage container at the edge of the site. He pulled the door open. He stepped inside. A moment later, he came back out, carrying 2 large construction heater units and an extension cord long enough to reach the generator. He set them down in the snow, 20 feet from the dragons. He plugged them inches. He turned them on. He stepped back. And without a single word, because words were not needed yet, Marcus Webb, Foreman of the Ashbury Community Center project, invited 4 ancient frost dragons out of the cold. The heaters hummed. Orange heat rippled out into the freezing air. The snow melted in a small circle around them. Marcus stood back and watched. The mother dragon did not move at first. She watched him. Her ice-blue eyes tracked every small shift in his posture, every breath he took. She was reading him, Marcus realized, the same way you read a new site before you start work. Looking for danger. Looking for tricks. Marcus sat down on an overturned crate. He put his flashlight on the ground. He made himself small. He rested his hands in his lap, palms up, opened. He had learned that from working with skittish machinery operators over the years. Do not loom. Do not press. Give them room. 3 minutes passed. Then the mother dragon moved. One slow step. Then another. She brought her head close to the nearest heater and held it there. Her eyes closed slightly. A long, trembling exhale came from her. The smaller adult followed. Then, carefully, the 2 young ones shuffled forward together. Marcus watched them warm up. The shaking slowed. The pale scales, which had looked almost gray with cold, began to shift back toward white. A faint shimmer appeared along the mother's neck, like frost crystals catching light, except the light was coming from inside her. Marcus had never seen a living dragon before. Nobody had. Not in recorded history. Not in any verified, credible account in the modern world. Dragons were mythology. They were children's stories. They were carvings on old church walls. Except they were standing 15 feet away from him, and one of the young ones was making a small sound, almost a whimper, that broke something open in his chest. He reached into the storage container behind him and pulled out his lunch bag. He had not eaten since noon. He had a half sandwich left and a thermos of tea. He opened the thermos slowly and deliberately, so the mother could see exactly what he was doing. He poured a cup of tea and set it on the ground between them. She sniffed it. She did not touch it. But the gesture had registered. Something in her posture changed. She lowered herself down onto the snow. Not collapsed, settled. like a dog finally lying down after a very long walk. Marcus drank his tea. The blizzard howled outside. Inside their small circle of warmth and heater lamp light, there was quiet. After a while, maybe 30 minutes, maybe more, Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his worn notebook. He used it for site measurements, material notes, sketches of load-bearing problems. He opened it to a blank page. He took out his pencil. He looked at the mother dragon. He pointed to the page. Then he pointed to her. She watched him. He drew a simple shape. 4 dragons. A rough circle around them. An arrow pointing inward toward the circle. Then he drew a question mark. He held it up. The mother dragon looked at the drawing for a long time. Then she looked at Marcus. Then she did something he was not prepared for at all. She spoke. Not in English. Not in any human language. It was a sound like stone moving slowly against stone, deep and resonant. With vibrations, Marcus felt in his sternum more than heard with his ears. But within that sound, somehow, there were shapes. There were meanings. Not words exactly. More like feelings pressed into sound. Marcus felt it more than understood it. Cold. Lost. Far from warmth. Searching. Old fire gone. Need old warmth. Only one place. Underground. Under here. He stared at her. He looked down at the notebook in his hands. Then he looked back up at the site. At the deep excavation trench behind the chain-link fence. At the hole they had been digging for 3 weeks. The hole that had gone deeper than the blueprints planned. The hole that had hit something strange. A layer of black volcanic stone that no geological survey had predicted. The hole that, 2 days ago, Marcus had stood beside at midnight and felt heat rising from. Real heat. Not geothermal. Not mechanical. Something older than both. He looked at the mother dragon. She was looking at him. And Marcus Webb, who never panicked, who never walked away from something that needed fixing, felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand straight up. Marcus could not sleep that night. He stayed at the site until 3 in the morning. He gave the dragons what he had, spare tarpaulins from the storage container, draped over the framework of steel scaffolding to cut the wind. More heat from the construction units. A bag of beef jerky that the young ones investigated cautiously and eventually ate. When he finally drove home, his mind was turning over everything like construction problem. He laid it out the way he always laid out a difficult build. What are the facts? What are the unknowns? What is the risk? Facts: 4 dragons existed. They were alive, real, and currently camped at his job site. The mother had communicated with him, not in words, but in something close enough. She had told him they were searching for something underground. Something under his site specifically. Unknown what exactly was under the site. Risk everything. He did not tell anyone the next morning. Not his crew. Not the project manager. Not his wife Sarah, who was away visiting her mother in Manchester. He made his crew work the western section of the site all day, far from the old stone wall. He told them the eastern side needed more ground testing before they could proceed. Nobody questioned him. Marcus never gave a bad order. All day, while his crew worked, he thought. He went back to what he had found 2 days before. It had been an accident. A routine depth check in the northeast corner of the excavation. His probe rod had broken through a thin layer of solid rock into empty space below. He had sent down a camera on a cable. What he had seen had not made sense to him at the time. A chamber. Large, maybe 30 feet across. Walls of black volcanic stone that shone like polished glass. And at the center, a raised stone platform. Circular, carved with patterns Marcus could not identify. And rising from that platform, very faintly, was heat. Not steam, not gas, just heat. A dry, bone-deep warmth that fogged the camera lens and made the readings on his thermometer spike to numbers that were impossible this far underground in northern England. He had marked it in his notebook with a single note, anomaly. Investigate. He had planned to bring in a geological consultant. He had not done that yet. Now he was very glad he had not. At 5 o'clock, when the last of his crew drove away, Marcus walked to the old stone wall. The dragons were there. The young ones were sleeping. The smaller adult, the father, Marcus had decided, raised his head when Marcus appeared. The mother was already standing, watching the sight with steady, patient eyes. Marcus pulled out his notebook. He had spent his lunch break drawing. He had drawn the chamber underground, the shape of it, the platform, the patterns. He had done his best to reproduce the carvings from the camera footage he had reviewed on his laptop. He held it out to the mother. She leaned forward. Her great head came down to the level of the page. She looked at the drawing for a very long time. Her nostrils flared. The faint shimmer along her neck intensified. And then she made a sound Marcus had not heard from her before. It was low, and it was broken, and it was unmistakably grief. Not fear, not confusion. Grief. She had been looking for this place for a very long time. Marcus understood that without being told. He felt it the way you feel whether changing, in the pressure of the air, in something instinctive and wordless. He looked at the chamber drawing. He looked at the mother. He thought about what a bad idea this was. He thought about all the regulations he would be breaking. He thought about the liability. He thought about what would happen if anyone found out. Then he put the notebook back in his pocket. He looked at the 4 dragons, ancient, cold, exhausted, and waiting. He said out loud, to no one in particular, well, let us go take a look then. He picked up his flashlight and his hard hat. And he walked toward the excavation trench. Getting 4 dragons through a construction site at night without anyone noticing required a specific kind of problem solving. Marcus was very good at that kind of problem. He had lowered a steel access ladder into the excavation weeks ago for ground inspections. It was rated for heavy equipment. It would hold. He went down first, alone, and confirmed the chamber access. The gap in the rock layer was just large enough. He had brought his electric lantern, his camera, and his notebook. He came back up. He looked at the mother dragon. He pointed down. She looked at the hole. She looked at him. She looked at the hole again. Then she folded herself elegantly, impossibly, and descended. She moved like water finding a path through rock. Her scales pressed flat. Her wings tucked in tight. She was larger than the gap should have allowed, and yet she fit. It was like watching something ancient remember how to be something ancient. The father followed, then the young ones, together small enough to slip through easily, but they still hesitated at the edge, pressing together the way young ones do. Marcus went last. The chamber was exactly as his camera had shown. Black volcanic walls gleaming like obsidian. The ceiling arched 30 feet overhead. The carved stone platform sat at the center, and the heat rose from it in slow, invisible waves. But with the dragons inside, something changed immediately. The carved patterns on the platform began to glow. Not brightly, not at first. Just a faint amber color, like embers under ash. But it was growing. As the mother stepped closer to the platform, the glow brightened. She placed one clawed foot on the carved surface. The patterns flared. The young ones made sounds. Quick, surprised sounds, full of something Marcus could only describe as recognition. Like someone coming home after a very long time and finding the house exactly as they had left it. The father pressed close to the platform. His whole body seemed to relax, every tense line in his frame softening, his wings loosening, his neck stretching long and low toward the carved stone. The heat in the room doubled, then doubled again. Marcus took off his jacket, then his flannel shirt. He stood in his undershirt and still felt the warmth pressing in from every direction. It was not uncomfortable. He had to search for the right word. It was like standing in direct sunlight after a very long winter. The mother turned to him. She looked at him for a long time. He had gotten used to her gaze by now. He knew it was intelligent. He knew it saw more than most creatures saw when they looked at him. She lowered her head until her face was level with his. Then she pressed the flat of her forehead gently against the flat of his. Marcus went very still. It was not painful. It was not frightening. It felt like a door opening quietly in a room he had not known was there. A rush of images, too fast and too large for his mind to fully hold. He saw mountains he had never seen. He saw fire that moved like a living thing. He saw a family ancient, enormous, gathered around a stone just like this one. Long, long ago. He saw what it meant to be the last of something. He saw what it meant to have home taken away slowly, over centuries, by cold and fear and the shrinking of wild places. He saw why they had come here. This chamber had been built by humans and dragons together, thousands of years ago, before the split, before the forgetting. A fireheart, they had called it. A place where dragon warmth and human craft had been joined in stone and heat. Marcus could not have explained any of this to another person. He did not have the words, but he understood it. In his chest, in some deep quiet place below language. He stepped back. The mother raised her head. And for the first time since he had found them, the glow that ran along her neck and back, that cold pale shimmer of a fire nearly out, changed. It turned gold. Warm, deep gold. The color of forged fire. The color of something restored. Marcus sat down on the stone floor. He put his hard hat on his knee. He watched the dragons come back to life. And he smiled. 3 days passed. Marcus kept his crew working on the western sections. He filed a routine delay report with the project manager, citing unexpected geological complications in the eastern zone. That bought him time. Not much, but enough. Every evening he brought food. He was not sure what dragons ate, so he started broad. The young ones liked fish. The father ate large amounts of raw beef that Marcus bought from a wholesale butcher outside town without asking questions. The mother ate very little, but seemed to draw most of her energy from the chamber itself, from long hours on the stone platform with her eyes closed and the carved patterns glowing steadily beneath her. By the 3rd day, the change was remarkable. The young ones ran. Actual running, bounding across the excavation floor, chasing each other around the platform, making short test flights that filled the chamber with the sound of enormous wings. Their scales had gone from gray-white to a deep lustrous silver blue, like moonlight on water. Their eyes were bright. Their movements were quick and full. The father had begun hunting on his own at night. Marcus would find evidence of it in the mornings. He did not ask what the father hunted. He decided he did not need to know. And the mother had done something that Marcus noticed on the 2nd morning, but did not fully understand until the 3rd. She had been carving. With one careful claw, she had been adding to the patterns on the stone platform. New marks, alongside the ancient ones. Marcus crouched beside them and looked closely. He recognized some shapes. They matched marks he had seen in his camera footage that first night, before the dragons arrived. But the new ones were different. One of them looked unmistakably like a human figure in a hard hat. Marcus stared at it for a long time. Then, on the evening of the 3rd day, Two things happened at once. The young ones flew for the first time, real flight, up through the excavation shaft and into the open night sky, circling above the construction site in long, glorious arcs. Marcus stood in the yard and watched them, breathing steam in the cold air, grinning like an idiot. And a black government SUV pulled up outside the site gate. Two men got out. Plain clothes. Official posture. The kind of men who did not announce what department they worked for. Marcus walked to the gate. Mr. Webb, the taller one, held up an id. We have received reports of unusual activity at this site. Thermal imaging from a satellite passed 3 nights ago showed a significant heat source in the northeast excavation zone. We would like to take a look. Marcus looked at the ID. He looked at the men. He looked at the sky, where, if you knew what to look for, you could still see 2 shapes circling far above the clouds. He thought about what these men would do if they found a family of ancient dragons in an underground chamber below a construction site in northern England. He thought about labs. He thought about containment. He thought about the look in the young one's eyes when they had run across the chamber floor for the first time. He thought about the carving on the stone, the human figure in a hard hat. Then Marcus Webb, Foreman, put on his most cooperative expression, the one he used when building inspectors arrived unannounced, and said, "Of course, I can walk you through everything. Let me pull up my ground survey reports. They will explain the thermal readings." He pulled out his notebook. He had already planned for this. He had spent 20 years managing construction sites. He knew how to make paperwork tell a story. He knew how to walk someone through an excavation and show them exactly what he wanted them to see. He knew which readings could be explained, which could be buried in technical language, and which access tunnels could be quietly closed off behind a sheet of plywood and a sign that said structural risk, authorized personnel only. He had spent 2 days preparing for exactly this moment. He was ready. Marcus walked the government men through the eastern zone for 90 minutes. He showed them his geological anomaly reports. He showed them temperature readings he had carefully relabeled. He had sealed the chamber access with a new steel plate that morning, bolted down and covered with a freshly poured concrete patch that was already setting. Above it, he had placed a heavy equipment pallet loaded with stone aggregate. The thermal camera the men carried showed residual warmth from the area, but Marcus explained it with 3 paragraphs of technical language about volcanic microshaft activity that he had researched online the night before. The shorter man wrote things in a notepad. The taller man looked at Marcus for a long time. "You have been at this site alone a lot of evenings," the taller man said. "I am the foreman," Marcus said simply. "That is the job." The man looked at him. Marcus looked back. Neither one looked away for several seconds. Then the taller man closed his folder. "We will be in touch if we need anything further," he said. They left. Marcus stood at the gate and watched their SUV drive away until the tail lights disappeared. Then he went to the site office, sat down, and stayed very still for about 5 minutes. Then he went back to work. That night he opened the chamber one last time. The mother was waiting at the bottom of the ladder. She had known somehow that something had changed, that the time had come. The young ones were already quieter than they had been. Still bright-eyed, still strong, but with a stillness that had not been there 3 days ago. A readiness. Marcus climbed down. He stood in the chamber. The carved patterns were glowing steadily, warm gold, deep and full, nothing like the cold, faint shimmer of that first night. The platform radiated a heat that had nothing to do with temperature, and everything to do with something Marcus could not name. He felt it in the same place he had felt the mother's forehead against his. Deep and quiet and true. He looked at all 4 of them. He had known this moment was coming. He had not spent any time fighting it. The mother stepped forward. She pressed her forehead to his one more time. This time the images were not a rush. They were slow and deliberate. He saw mountains, real ones. He understood now. A place north and east of where they had come from. Somewhere old and high and empty of people. A range that dragons had used as a resting ground long ago. Before the forgetting. He saw it clearly, almost as if she were giving him a map. He understood. She was telling him where they were going. She was telling him they would be safe. She stepped back, and then the young ones came forward, one at a time. Each one pressed their small head briefly against his hand, the way the smallest one had done on the very first night. Quick, warm, light as a breath. Then they were done. Marcus climbed back up the ladder. He pulled it up after him. He stood at the edge of the excavation in the dark and watched. They came up through the shaft silently, one by one, flowing up into the night sky like smoke rising. The young ones took the air first. Wide, confident strokes, nothing like the test flights of 3 days ago. The father next, banking wide and high. The mother last. She circled once above Marcus. Just once. Then she turned north. And they were gone. Marcus stood in the empty construction site in the dark, in the cold, in the snow, his hard hat on his head, his worn notebook in his hand, the site exactly as it had been before, except for a sealed steel plate under a concrete patch, and a carving on a stone platform 60 feet underground that would probably never be found for a very long time. He looked at the sky for a long moment. Then he picked up his tools. He had a job to finish. But here is the part nobody expected. 6 weeks later, the project resumed on the eastern zone. Marcus was there when the team broke through to check the foundation integrity below the concrete patch. The steel plate was still sealed. But when Marcus checked the chamber camera, alone, quietly, before anyone else arrived, he saw something new. The carved stone platform had changed. The patterns the mother had been adding, the new ones alongside the ancient ones, had not stopped the night the dragons left. There were more now. Much more. Dozens of small, careful marks that had not been there the night the dragons departed. Marcus zoomed the camera in. He looked at them for a very long time. He had studied old carvings. He had researched symbols in his 2 nights of reading before the government men arrived. He did not understand all of it. But there was enough. They were names. Dragon names, in a system of marking he had never seen described anywhere. But there were other marks too. Simpler ones. Repeated ones. One symbol appeared over and over, near the human figure at the center of the pattern. It took Marcus 3 days of quiet research to find a match. It was a word from a very old language. Older than English. Older than Latin. It appeared in a footnote of an obscure linguistic study of pre-Roman symbolic marks found on standing stones across northern Britain. The word was keeper. Marcus Webb, construction foreman from a small town in northern England, had been given a name by creatures who had existed for thousands of years. He had been made, in whatever way dragons make such things official, the keeper of the last fire heart. He sat with that for a long time. Then he went back to work, because that was what he did. But every morning after that, when Marcus drove to the site and climbed out of his beat-up truck and put on his yellow hard hat, he looked north. Just for a moment. Just long enough. If this opened your eyes to what quiet courage really looks like, stay with me. Because the next story is even bigger. And it starts with something even more impossible. And that, right there, is what makes this story live in your mind long after the video ends. Marcus Webb did not save the world. He did not carry a weapon. He did not have a special power. He had a notebook, a hard hat, 2 construction heaters, and the specific kind of courage that comes from knowing how to solve a problem without panicking. That is the heart of every great HFY story. Not superhumans, not armies, just ordinary people meeting an impossible moment and choosing the right thing. Let us bring it back to the three things this story proved. First, humans do not need to be extraordinary to do extraordinary things. Marcus was good at his job. That was all. And it was enough. It was more than enough. Because goodness applied to the right moment becomes something that lasts for thousands of years. Literally carved in stone. Second, the thing that saved the dragon family was not power. It was warmth. 2 construction heaters and a man who sat down, made himself small, and waited. That patience, that specific, deliberate kind of human patience, is something Marcus had and the dragons had never encountered before. It broke through every barrier faster than force ever could have. Third, secrecy is sometimes the highest form of protection. Marcus did not post this online. He did not call the news. He did not tell his crew or his wife or his project manager. He understood, instinctively, that the world was not ready for this. And because of that instinct, 4 ancient dragons are alive right now, somewhere in the mountains north of Ashbury, warm and free, carrying a fire that was almost lost forever. 3 lessons, freely given, permanently kept. Now here is what I want from you. If you are watching this and something in it hit you differently, that moment when Marcus just turned on the heaters and stepped back, drop a comment below. Tell me one word. Just one word for what you think that moment was. I want to see what you say. I want to know if you felt what this story was really about. And if you have never subscribed to this channel, do it now. Right now, while you are still thinking about it. Hit that subscribe button and the bell notification so you never miss what is coming next. This channel is built for people who believe humans are more remarkable than the world ever gives them credit for. Every story here is proof of that. If you want to go deeper, the next video is already waiting for you. It is another HFY story, and I will tell you right now, the human in that one starts in an even worse position than Marcus. No tools, no crew, no sight, just one person and an impossible choice. It is, arguably, the most powerful story this channel has ever told. The link is on screen right now. Click it. And one last question, one real question, that I want you to sit with tonight. If you were Marcus Webb, if you came around that corner in the blizzard and saw those 4 dragons in the snow, what would you have done? Would you have run? Would you have called someone? Or would you have gone to the storage container, picked up the heaters, and just fixed it? Drop your answer in the comments. Because I think the answer says everything about who you are. See you in the next one.